Thanks very much for spending a little time with me today talking about my third book in the Quilt Chronicles series titled The Message on the Quilt. As an avid quilt lover, I've often looked at old quilts and wondered about the women who made them, what they were like, what they were thinking, and where their family was. In the case of A Message on the quilt belongs to a young man named Noah Shaw, whose mother used to tell him stories about the images that she embroidered on the quilt that she left behind. In this book, we get to go with Noah into his past and to learn some things that are very surprising to him. But by the end of The Message on the quilt, readers learn that the message is one of hope and of promise for a wonderful future. This is the third book in the Quilt Chronicles series. The other two were The Key on the Quilt and The Shadow on the Quilt. I've really enjoyed being able to bring to life some of my some of what I call my overactive imagination when I look at antique quilts and other things from the past, and I hope you enjoy it too. Each of the books in this series really are standalones insofar as the characters and the setting are involved. Each of them, though, has a very significant textile in it, a quilt, that both serves as a symbol of the story and also in some cases drives the story forward. In the case of The Message on the Quilt, I had fun because I had the quilt belong to the hero of the story instead of the heroine. The quilt that drives this story is something that a boy's mother left for him, and she used to use it to tell him stories, and he begins to wonder if some of those stories might have been true. He doesn't know a great deal about his past, and he's trying to discover that. And in the end, the quilt will be a very significant family relic, family artifact that will help Noah find himself and also the lady he loves. Emilie is a young girl. She isn't married yet. She says in the book that she's never been in love before, and she's at odds with herself and with her parents over what she wants to be when she grows up. In the other two stories, the women were already married when the book opens, and they were a little bit more mature. They thought they knew who they were. They thought they knew what their life was going to be like, and they ended up with great surprises. The Message on the Quilt is a little bit more about a girl discovering herself and deciding what her dreams are and what the Lord would have for her in life, and then having the courage and the strength to follow that path. Of course, if we have an Emilie, we have to have a hero in the story, and so Emilie will get to meet a young man named Noah Shaw. Noah is a very well-known public speaker. He's on the Chautauqua circuit going around the nation, and he calls himself the man of many voices. He does all kinds of monologues from Shakespeare to stories for children. He tells Mark Twain's story about the famous jumping frog. He recites poetry, he recites scripture, but his voice is the thing that has given Noah fame. Minor characters in the book are someone that Noah meets on the train on his way to the setting where most of the book takes place. There's a very mysterious older woman named Grace Jumeau who's been on the stage, and she wears outdated clothing and is a little bit tattered and frayed around the edges. And Grace has a secret, just as Noah does, and as the book moves forward, we get to know a little bit more about Grace, and we get to see her grow. I had a lot of fun with that character. She just kind of popped up on the train and surprised me, but we had a good time together, and of course Grace's story is redeemed. All of my books end with a message of hope. There's also a Colonel Barton in the book, who is an old military man. He's been all over the West as part of the Indian Wars, and his quest in life right now is he tries to help family members find missing soldiers. He has an uncanny memory for the names of the men who served with him in the West, and that is his personal quest, is to help family members come to closure if they have military men who have gone missing during the Indian Wars. So we have Grace Jumeau, we have Colonel Barton, we have Noah Shaw, we have Emilie Rhodes, and then, of course, you always want a couple of characters for a little bit of fun, and Colonel Barton's housekeeper, Ladora Riley, ended up being a very fun character. She talks a lot. She is someone that I would love to have been able to spend time with. My American history and women's history specifically are very passionate interests of mine, and so anytime that I can delve into the past and get to know the real women who inspire my stories, that ends up being a very favorite part of the research process for me. I was able to spend some time at the Gage County, Nebraska Museum, Historical Society Museum, which is where one of the largest Chautauqua events in Nebraska took place in 1890. That's where my book is set. It was a delightful day. As far as inspiration to becoming a Christian author goes, my story is probably a little bit unique in that when I began writing the very first story that would become my first published novel, I really wasn't thinking in terms of becoming a published author. My children had been homeschooled, and in learning about Nebraska history, we had studied the lives of some pioneers who were buried in an abandoned cemetery near our home. During that time, I began to read about women who settled the West, and they really provided some very tactile, some very real encouragement to me, giving me perspective on my own trials during a difficult time in my life in the 1990s. Because of that, I began to write a story about an imaginary pioneer woman, not thinking of publication at all. But that story took on a life of its own, and I did eventually end up sending it off to request some publishers take a look at it and see what they thought. That became my first 3-book series called the Prairie Wind series back in the 1990s. Since that time, the Lord has blessed me and allowed me to continue to be writing, and the fact that I am still writing all these years later never ceases to amaze me. I treasure it as a great blessing. It's very humbling, and it's really wonderful to be able to continue to be involved as a full-time writer. There are so many authors walking this planet who have blessed me and who have been instrumental in my writing journey and in my life that I honestly wouldn't know where to begin to list the names. But one that I will mention, because she graduated to heaven just this past Easter Sunday, is Edith Schaefer. Edith Schaefer's book, Hidden Art, was a textbook in one of my niece's home economic classes. Probably when I was in high school, I became familiar with that book and read it. And I can't tell you how encouraged I was to read that book and to be shown how to use creativity in my home as a homemaker and as a young mother when the day came that I had kids, and I was blessed to be able to be at home full time for them. So that introduction to Edith Schaefer led me to other books. I don't really have the brain for Dr. Francis Schaeffer's books. A lot of my college friends were greatly impacted by Dr. Schaefer's work. True writer's block isn't something that I've actually struggled with, where I just was completely frozen with a story and did not know where to go next. I have at times, though, gotten stuck and wondered and questioned myself, or maybe not really known how a character would react to a certain event. One of the things that I'll do when that happens is I'll stop writing the scene that I'm working on that's been so difficult, and I'll move on. I'll move ahead to another scene that I know I have to write, and often that will kind of get me unstuck, and then I can go back and fix the problematic passage. Another thing that author Robin Lee Hatcher has said that I tried that I found very helpful is to write the autobiography of one of your point of view characters. Decide what success is for you. Is success only if you get a publishing contract from a traditional royalty-paying publisher? Is success obedience that you are writing? What do you define success for your writing life. This is what I wrote down for myself. I often remind myself that success in light of eternity has nothing to do with books sold. Success in light of eternity means obedience to the audience of one. In 100 million years, it will not matter if I was published, if my name appeared on any bestseller list, if I received any writing awards. In 100 million years, what will matter is my obedience to my Lord. If He says, well done, then whatever happened here below was good, and I did achieve success in the truest sense of the word. The writing life is a life that's filled with rejection. It can be very trying. It can be very discouraging at times. And so that's why I say the first thing to do if you want to be an author is decide what you're headed for. What's your target? What's your goal? What is success to you? So that you know when you've reached it. Another thing is really, really obvious, but a lot of us forget that to be a writer, we have to write. Yes, we spend time on social media, and yes, we talk back to our readers, and yes, we go to writers' conferences. But if we don't spend the time first staring at a blank screen and filling that page with words, we don't have anything to work with, and we aren't writers.